And welcome everyone as everyone comes back into the webinar after getting a coffee or a nice drink in between. This is our fifth company of the day. And this will be the last one for today. And we saved one of the best for last. So we talked a lot about gold. We talked a lot about salt. This one specifically on rare earth. And it's also a pre-public company as well. So lots of interesting things to be said here. We're going to be joined by the president and CEO, Barry Miller. There were some technical difficulties there, so the video is not working for today, but you will hear a voice come in. So I'll introduce you in just a moment here, Barry. And of course, we have the exploration manager as well of Brent, Hemingway. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you, Brandon.
You're welcome, everyone.
And just before Barry goes on with his introduction, then we'll hand it over to Brent to go through a detailed explanation of who this company is and what they are doing. Just reminding everybody about the chat function off the side. Please, we'd love to hear where you're coming from. The city, the state, the province, the country. Always curious to see where people are tuning in from. And then beside the chat function, you're going to see the Q&A function. That's really important. If you already had questions coming into this, or you're hearing this presentation at some point, you're like, wait a second, I'd like to know a little bit more about that certain thing. You can go into the Q&A area. You can put your questions there. Once Brent and Barry are finished with their presentation today, we'll go over there and we'll start going into the question and answer period afterwards. So I'll turn off my camera now and I'll pass it over to yourself, Barry, for a quick introduction for yourself.
Thank you, Brandon. My name's Barry Miller. I'm the president and CEO of Rare Earth Ridge Resources Corp. And we have a property 90 kilometers northeast of Dease Lake, British Columbia, called the Mount Hart property. And we're very excited in what we've found up there recently, having a couple geological groups up there to do some sampling. We've got some assays pending here really shortly. And what I'd like to tell you guys is that we definitely do have something up there, and we're going to actually develop it over the next few field seasons. So my geologist, Brent Hemingway, who's the manager for Rare Earth Ridge, is going to walk you through the slideshow and tell you guys what we have going on there. We have an excellent group of people involved in this. Deepak Malhotra from RDI Metallurgy at Wheat Ridge, Colorado. Dr. Lee Grout from the University of British Columbia is with us. Also, my partner, Robert Ripplinger, a successful businessman out of Logan, Utah. So we've got a good group of guys, and like I said, I want Brent to explain what we have and what we got going on there. So Brent, go ahead and walk everybody through the slideshow. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Brent Hemingway. I'm a consulting geologist with a graduate in 1978 from UBC. What I can tell you about Mount Hart, it's unique in its own nature. The first slide that you see there is one of our geologists, junior geologists, sat on top of the knoll area, which I will explain further into this deck of cards here. The view is to the north, looking at Mount Hart itself in the background. The next slide is basically the potential. Why are rare earth minerals and metals critical? It's because of China being the world leader in dominating the economics of rare earth elements to the world. And in North America here, we like to be a little bit more independent from other countries. So there's a big push with the governments here to try to develop rare earth projects here in North America and to supply our needs for these critical metals. The next slide is where the location of the property is. Off to the left there, you'll see a little blue dot. That's the corner and region of BC that this project is located in. It is frontier country. The project is in the foothills, on the western foothills of the Cassiar mountain range, which goes all the way up to the Yukon and into Alaska. It's also in a range, what they call the tin tungsten belt of BC, that goes all the way down to Washington State. What we have at Mount Hart, preliminary estimates are that we've got at least 800 million tons of 0.06562% rare earth elements and rare metals. The next slide is the board of directors and management. Barry Miller, president. Robert Ripplinger, a very successful mechanical engineer with several worldwide patents on plastic extrusions. You can see me there, the next slide over, Brent Hemingway, exploration manager. That's a picture of me when I was a younger fellow, being chased by all the ladies. And Mr. Deepak Malhotra, who is a mining engineer, mineral economist. He also did the initial studies on another rare earth project in the United States, in Texas, called Round Top. That is another tonnage, low grade rare earth project, similar to Mount Hart, as the mineralization at Round Top is very, very similar to what we have at Mount Hart. And compares very well with Round Top. Dr. Lee Grote, a UBC professor in geochemistry and crystal chemistry, and Mark Chaland, who is our AR and logistics manager. The next slide just shows the samples that were gathered in the field, as well as from a previous report. The problem with the Mount Hart is identifying the rare earth elements and minerals in the rocks. Very, very seldom do you ever see the mineralization. It's very fine grained, but it's tied in with the biotites. There was one sample here that you can see in the center there, where you can just see these little red streaks in this white rock here, and that is rare earth elements. All the rest are unidentified materials, but it tells you that basically these black that you see is an oxide environment, which is very favorable for rare earth element mineral developments. Investment attractiveness, 16th worldwide, 5th in Canada. That's the province of BC. Mineral potential worldwide, we're 12th. Availability of labor and skills, we're doing very well at that as well. The next slide is basically the target area that we identified in the previous prospectors report back in 2010. The report gave us a whole host of information. And the prospectors that did that work did a very good job of presenting the full suite, the full range of exploration methods: thin section work, heavy metal separation in the creeks, and just general silt sampling. You got to remember that these guys went in that area based on a 2008 re-assay by the BC Government Geological Survey for the silts in the creeks, which gave rare earths and heavy fluorine flowing down the creeks. These prospectors didn't know what they were looking at, so they went in there and they did all the basic prospecting techniques that any prospector would do on a new project. They didn't know what they were looking at. You can take the rocks, and as such, you can see in the rocks, this is a typical rock that was gathered this summer at the property. And you can definitely see that there's no indications at all of any rare earths in this rock at all. And as such, those prospectors were faced up with those kinds of obstacles in trying to identify the rare earths and the concentrations of the rare earths in the rocks. However, the assays come back as this has been 0.06562% rare metals, rare earths contained in this rock, very similar to, like I say, Round Top in the United States. So these prospectors started sampling, and you can see the old prospecting sample stations here and so forth. There was the null area was the area that we identified as the primary target. HS007F1 and HRCB 1, 2, and 3, they're all very consistent, and that's stretched over almost a whole kilometer. So we identified this as the primary area because of not only of those samples, but also high tin in the creeks to the west, which grade about 19% tin, and the same thing with the creek to the northwest as well. So we figured that yes, this intrusion here has a good potential of being well mineralized throughout the whole suite. Um, Rare Earth Ridge owns 100% of the claim acquired by staking. The null area measures at least a kilometer by a kilometer. The elevation difference on that null area represents a total volume of rocks, about 937 million tons. And as such, the focus of the company is to try to develop this into a mine. We feel that the economics is such that this has a very good chance of rating with some of the world-class deposits, low tonnage, and I should say low assay, high tonnage deposit. The next slide, slide 8 here, shows you the claim structure of the area. Apex Geoscience is staked all around us. They are also part and parcel of Defense Minerals and a whole host of other rare earth companies as well. So they've also recognized the potential of this area. Slide 9, this shows you the assays here. And if you go back to the original slide here, back at slide number 6, you see the locations here. Primary tick focus of 01, 02, and 003. And you can see the assays here are fairly consistent. We're getting good gallium, a good hafnium, niobium, rubidium, and so forth, all the way across the whole suite of the rare earths and rare metals. The next slide is, we needed to know how the rare earths are situated, whether they're situated in silicates and tied and bound up in silicates, which is not favorable for extraction purposes. So we put these slides in showing you the style and how the mineralization is hosted. And a geologist, a professor of petrology, Dr. Lee Coulter, did the send section work, and he's identified that the biotites here, you can see is surrounded by quartz and K-spar, and then you do the close-ups here, we're getting our monzonite, we're getting our columbiite, tontonite, magnetite, and you can note that it's all tied in with magnetite and zircons. We're also getting scant bastonite and monzonite, as you can see in this photo, throughout the rocks are ubiquitous in the biotites. Again, this next slide here is the null area that we've targeted. Note that it's above ground or above the valley floors. And all the drainages in the area are all red earth. So this is our primary target area. The next slide just is basically a technical slide to show you the type of granite that we have. It is a highly differentiated granite based on the geochemistry of the whole rock analysis of the property. Mind you, it's only 6 samples. But our sampling here is gathered 35 samples. So those will be technical studies in progress. I did a plot here, and it shows that the rocks are basically a pegmatite or near pegmatite. When I was in the field this summer, I could take a rock and just lightly tap it with my hammer, and it would just shatter apart. Other rocks, I could just look at them and grab them and just crush them with my hand, and as such, I felt that this was easily grindable. The next slide is basically the references to the different deposits worldwide. The Nijlako in the Northwest Territories, or Thor Lake, Strange Lake, Round Top is the best comparable worldwide deposit that I've identified, similar to Mount Hart. The only difference is it's very fine grained. Rocks were very coarse grained, easy to grind. There are world-class deposits. There's the La Paz deposit in Arizona. That's at 0.03%. It's also close to 800 million tons or thereabouts. There's also the Charlie Creek deposit in Australia, about 0.03%, and there's others in Africa as well that compares very well as to the amount of trios and the amount of tonnage. What I felt is that the timeline on this is that you can see that the 2010 was the original project. It was put on hold in 2013, and the world economy started slumping into especially the mining industry started slumping into sort of a recession or a decline. In 2021, I recognize this as a potential large tonnage, low grade rare earth target, similar to other world-class bodies. I presented this project to Mr. Barry Miller, and he said we should stake this ground as quickly as we can. Pardon me. In the summer of 2022, in August, we went back in. We figured that, well, since this rare earth deposit is fairly uniform in rare earth mineralization, we decided to go in and we sampled the null area as well as along the base of the null, and we got in close to 35 samples, big bulk samples, roughly about 250 pounds of rock. Those assays came back very similar to what the previous prospectors found in 2010 with rare earth bearing at 0.062%. So it's within assay range as well as within variance. The next phase is to do a what they call a bench grind test. We have enough rock samples here to send in for a grind test, which will tell us the recoveries and to see if this thing is economic to grind out the rare earths and separate them. We don't know the method of separation yet. There's 4 different methods of separation, and that's the next phase. If that comes back positive, then we got to do more sampling back in 2023, early in 2023, enough to get 200 pounds to do a metallurgical test. We're sort of doing a reverse engineering on this project, where we're doing the engineering studies first to see if we can extract rare earth elements at an economic rate. Whereas a lot of companies, they go in, they go gung-ho, they drill, they do all this, and then all suddenly they do the grind test and the bench test and the metallurgical test, and they find out that, yeah, there's problems here in extraction. In the meantime, you wasted close to $800 to $1 million in drilling, only to find out that at present it's not economic. We're doing this reverse. We're trying to save money, not only for the shareholders, but for the company. Is that if everything goes ahead, the grind test comes back positive, then we go and we take more samples. If the metallurgical test comes back positive, then we do our big expenditures on drilling. And that will be at least a $2 to $3 million program with percussion drilling and diamond drilling. So anyway, that's what I have for everyone. I feel that this project has a very good shot of becoming economic. And I hope you share the vision with me that this thing can be easily ground out according to the thin section work and the magnetite. There's a separate methods that we can use there is the magnetic separation. And as such, there's a whole host of methods that we can use. Thank you very much for your time and patience with me. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Brent, for going into such detail. A lot of people who are here today not only just want to find out about an opportunity, but they want to get that in-depth discussion on it, which they absolutely got today. So I appreciate that very, very much. So we have Brent and we'll have Barry on here for our Q&A. We'll head over to the right now to see what some of the investors have been asking. Jackson writes, how does Trudeau declaring rare earths a critical metal affect companies in your space?
Go ahead, Brent.
Well, Mr. Trudeau's initiative is not only he's just following suit with the President of the United States, where there's a government push into research into separation techniques, as well as the U.S. military does finance projects that they feel that are worthy of becoming a mine. That's somewhere down the road, but we're very positive with the governments here trying to encourage mining companies and explorers to go out there and look for these large tonnage, low grade deposits. This deposit is basically, I envision as to be a huge mine, like a porphyry copper moly gold mine, which operates at a lot less valuation than what we have at Mount Hart. Mount Hart is roughly about $100 Canadian in rare earth elements and rare metals. So as such, we're very much in the ball game as ordinary base metal porphyry deposits.
Thanks, Brent.
I also have to remind you that the Mount Hart is a quarry operation, not an open pit. We're not lifting up the ore to a grind, which costs money for fuel costs and energy costs. We're bringing it downhill. And if everyone wants to take a look at another company called Victoria Gold and their mine operation in the Yukon, it's a very similar operation that I have and the company is envisioned with this project. Thank you.
Yeah, fascinating. Appreciate that. Well, you're just talking about a potential company that may be similar to yourselves in a different area. Now, this next question is talking about neighboring projects. Bryce asks, what are the neighboring projects surrounding your property?
Okay, the neighboring projects are to the west of it, immediately to the west of us, only about 10 kilometers away, is the giant Chernigan nickel project. And that is a huge ultramafic complex with low-grade nickel. Apparently, the Japanese and the Koreans have been in there just recently this last summer taking a look at that property. It's been on the go for many, many years. The other projects is Red Chris, just north of Dease Lake. That's a huge open pit copper gold mine. To the north, there's the Victoria Gold. That's in operation. That's mining about a gram of gold per ton, about $60 US per ton, a lot less grades, but on their website, you can see a video of their mining operations. And that is something that I have envisioned at Mount Hart. Thank you.
Yeah, very, very cool to hear and see. And it's always good to get a visual representation of that as well. I think this is quite similar, actually, to the first question here, where it's talking about how China controls most of the supply chain for rare earths. Do you see Canada increasing the benefits for rare earth companies and further building out the supply chain?
Is that a question for Barry?
No, it's for Brent. Go ahead.
The supply chain, well, that needs to be developed. That's some years down the road. We're hoping that by 2025, 2026 on this project that we will have our feasibility studies all done and completed and our resource calculations. Right now, we can't do a resource calculation because we haven't done any drilling. But the sampling that we've done here in the last summer has indicated over an area of a kilometer by a kilometer, roughly close to 900 million tons of in situ rock that is rare earth bearing.
Yeah, so it'll be very interesting to see if Canada really does put their money in the laws where their mouth is. So we will see very shortly on that. I can only imagine they would, given how much North America is really pushing for domestic supply of all of these important minerals, metals, and everything in between. Another technical question here is, how does the MT Hart deposit differ from other rare earth deposits?
Well, when I first was involved with this project back last year in April, the first thing I do is always try to compare projects and deposits and mineralogy to other world-class deposits. And I find that the only one that I've come across of similar age and mineralogy is the Round Top in the United States. Round Top is dealing in rhyolites, which is a volcanic or sometimes a very shallow intrusive form. It's very, very fine grain rock. At Mount Hart, where you got the pretty well the same mineralogy, except we're in granites. And granites are just a coarser version of rhyolite. But what it does also, when you get coarser, it's easier to grind.
Which is also very important, of course. Now turning to some financial questions, or specifically around going public. The question here is, when do you expect to potentially go public?
That'll be about the third quarter of 2023. We're just doing a little program on a platform called vested.ca to get our 150 shareholders, and then we'll do a non-offering prospectus. Hopefully, like I said, in the second or third quarter of 2023. We've got a few things that we have to get ironed out with the First Nations, and so it's going to take a bit of time. But basically, the answer is Q2, Q3 of 2023.
Perfect. And that blends with Dean's question asking, are you listing, or do you have plans on listing on the CSC or the TSX Venture, or something in between?
We're going to start out on the CSE to begin with, and then, like I said, for our European investors, they like to see the TSX Venture on their screen. It's easier for them to access. So I believe we'll graduate from the CSC to the TSX eventually, and hopefully, if things go real well, maybe the big board, the TSX.
Absolutely, definitely. The goal as the years go on, you continue to prove this out.
Exactly.
Jackson's asking a much more specific question about that raise that you just spoke on. Is there a pre-IPO deal terms? Are there shares outstanding, offering price? I'm assuming he's just looking for a corporate structure breakdown, and potentially what does that IPO or next raise look like?
Okay, well, listen, there's 18.2 million shares outstanding as of today on Rare Earth Ridge. Obviously, it's owned by the insiders. All the insiders own all the shares. We're doing this little financing at 5 cents through Vested just to get our distribution, and then we're in talks with some groups out of Toronto on what price that we're going to do the direct listing, and we're hoping it'll be at a minimum of 15 cents a share with a half a warrant at 25. And then if these next set of results that we're going to get, hopefully in the next week or so, if they're consistent, then we're going to try and do 10 million shares at 25 cents to get us out of the gate.
Yeah, fantastic to hear. And once again, something that a lot of investors sometimes don't get access to is finding these deals, finding these companies in the earlier rounds before actually going public. So by all means, please reach out to Barry or Brent if this has caught your interest. I'm sure they can talk to you a little bit more about that. Well, gentlemen, I believe that's settled all of the questions that we have in this area here. I just want to thank you so much for all of the work that you put into this and the time that you've given, not just to tell your story, but to answer these questions from investors as well. And for all of our investors with us as well, thank you so much for joining us for RMEC. There were some great presentations done today, and just a lot of opportunities that are out there. The exploration world is continually getting more exciting leading into 2023. There's a lot of other macro environments that are helping to really push this as well. So certainly start looking for your horses and start looking for those companies that you think stand out, diversify into different areas, and get ready for what many are hoping and planning for being a much better 2023 than when we saw in 2022. Gentlemen, thank you so much for all of your time.
Brandon, thank you very much.
And you're very welcome, Brandon. And thank you, audience, for your time.
Perfect. All right, guys. Well, I appreciate it. I hope that everyone enjoys the rest of their day today as well. And thank you for wrapping up this RMEC conference series. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.